and welcome back to the channel. This is the video I never knew I wanted to make. I just recently took this quilt out of the blanket chest that it was in because I was planning on doing a video on a second trunk show of quilts that I've either made or received or bought. I received this quilt just as a quilt top when my grandpa died, and it had been made by my grandma and great-grandma and had been sitting in a trunk for a number of years. And then it sat in the blanket chest for about 15 more years until I asked somebody to put a backing on it and to hand quilt it for me. And that was 30 years ago. It measures 84 inches by 105 inches. I suspect that the quilt was made in the early 50s, if not earlier, and the fabric is probably fabric from the 1930s or 1940s. It's in remarkable shape for as old as it is because I haven't used it. And I really need to get it out and just put it on a bed so that I can enjoy it. I really don't know what this quilt design or pattern is called. It has 8 diamond shapes, or you may call it a rhombus or a lozenge, that join together to make like a flower or a lone star. It looks as though the fabric scraps have been cut into strips and then sewn together to make a fabric to cut into the rhombus or diamond shape or lozenge. This is the way that the quilt most likely would have been used as a bedspread, mid-20th century, tucked under the pillows like that. I put the paper around the perimeter of the block so that you could get a better sense of how the blocks are joined together. It's somewhat difficult to discern where the diamond shapes are with all of the different strips of fabric and color, but here you can see a little more clearly the outline of the diamond shapes. The block measures 22 by 23 inches. This pattern reminds me a little of the Lemoyne or lemon star block that I made for the yellow lemon star quilt. But you can see that the half square triangles put together do not make a true rhombus or diamond shape. So here's what always happens when I'm trying to look at a quilt and figure out what to do with it or how it's made. I measured from the center point to the elbow of the diamond, and it was 6 3/4, well, between 6 3/4 to 7 inches. Then from the elbow to the other point, another 6 3/4 inches. From point to point on the width, it was 5 inches. So to recreate this pattern, I would make I would make the diamond probably 7 or 7.5 inches from point to elbow, and 7 or 7.5 inches from elbow to point, with 5 or 5.5 inches in the middle. The measurement from point to elbow will need to be the same as the measurement of the half square triangle. And you'll need to allow for 1/2 inch seam allowance on your pieces. One thing that may be intimidating, and I think that I would find intimidating, or I do find intimidating, is that the squares will need to be done with a Y seam in between the diamond shapes. I found a good video on YouTube called How to Sew a Basic Y Seam in a Quilt Block by Edita Sitar of Laundry Basket Quilts. So if you decide to do them 7.5 inches, then do your half square triangles, make your half square triangles 7.5 inches square, and from point to elbow, I guess, make it 7.5 inches. I've never made a Lone Star before, so I may be steering you wrong, but that's what I would start out doing. At the top and at the bottom and on both sides, there are half squares that will need to be sewn in as well. So have tons of fun with that. This is the pattern that those half square triangles make once you put all the blocks together. And I love the lovely little petals that my quilter quilted onto them. So here's one of the reasons why I love old quilts. They unashamedly patch a piece, and it looks great. And we love the character that it brings to the old quilt. To try a different look to show you, I have pulled down part of the cover to expose the back and contrast with the bright and vibrant colors. And I have put 2 pillows with pillowcases on them that have some of the same colors as the quilt does. I love how beautiful and bright the colors still are, and I recognize some of these fabrics from the quilt that my grandmother made for my mother when she got married, except they are so worn and faded from the quilt being used. So it's fun to have these old vintage fabrics and see the colors and how they just pop, especially against this backing. With this view, you can see the pattern of the quilting and how it shows against the plain fabric, the plain pink fabric. The border consists of 4 different strips in pink and aqua and a dusty rose and the darker dusty rose. And they're about 1.5 inches in width. For the binding, you can see that she just matched the front to the back, and it looks like she sewed it by hand. I don't really remember what the backside of the top quilted piece looked like, before it was quilted together. I don't remember if it was hand sewn or machine stitched. So thanks for coming along with me for my tour of an old quilt. I hope it gave you some inspiration or some motivation to finish those quilt tops that are in blanket chests or top shelves of closets. And if you made it to the end of this video and endured the dryer sounds, kudos to you.
Have her sit with me?
She wants to be in the spotlight.
Okay, pull it a little taut.
Take it before she comes back out.
Thanks for watching. Goodbye.